Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. How's everybody feeling today? So let's get started by just talking about just a one word. Why don't we use our chat function and say, how are we feeling today? My one word is I'm excited, and I'm typing it in right now. Wonderful. I hear great, energized. That's fantastic. Good. Awesome. Rochelle, Alberto, Anna, Annie, thank you. Optimistic, Amy says. Inspired, curious. I like the word curious. Grateful. Kevin says fabulous. Wonderful. I love hearing these words. I love the format. Ooh, there is some dancing happening right now. I'm going to stop that share and let's try doing that screen share again and see how that works. All right. People are, okay, wonderful. Felicia Price, excited, learning, inspired. What a great group. Everybody's on here. All right. I'm Vineeta Kumar. I am a transplant nephrologist at University of Alabama in Birmingham, and I'm here to talk to you about strategies to increase living donation. How do you engage a potential donor? To get us started, what I would love is for you to go to the button next to your chat where it says polls. If you could please click on the poll. And the first question is, who is in the audience? I would love to know, who do we have here today? Are you a nurse, dietitian, physician, social worker, dialysis technician, patient, industry professional, other? If you could fill that poll out, that would be awesome. And then after you do that poll, I would love for you to play with me. Why are you here? Some of you said curious, so hey, that's your option. Want to help potential recipients, need to learn more about kidney donation or living donation, need the CME, yes, don't we all with the virtual world? I'm considering living donation. Wow. So take a moment, fill out those two polls. And if you are looking to see where the poll button is, it's right next to the chat button, top right. Should be chat, polls, people, click on chat. Alberto, Robert, if you could put that in the poll, that'd be awesome. I see you in your chat function. It's great. Deborah, same thing. If you could go to the poll and fill it out. And Jessica, can we show the answers to the first poll? Who is in the audience today? Am I able to see the poll results? I'm not able to see the results. Let's see. Okay, we can always show the results of that later. Why don't we get started with the talk portion? All right. So thank you, everybody, again, for being here today. I have no relevant financial disclosures to this presentation. And our objective is pretty simple. In the next 6 or 7 minutes, we are going to focus on discussing effective communication strategies as we approach living kidney donation. But the twist here is, as you listen to the slides, I would really like you to ask you to put yourself in the shoes of our patients, sort of the recipient perspective, as you will. And in doing that, I'd like to cover this portion of the talk in 3 broad categories, really addressing needs of the community, the transplant candidate, and the potential donor. And what do I mean by that? Most of us in the audience are pretty aware of the need for living kidney donation, right? In the graphic to the top, you can see that annually there are about 100,000 people waiting for a kidney transplant in the United States. And unfortunately, less than 20% actually end up getting a transplant. And the bad thing is that most people have to wait a long time. And annually, we lose about almost now the numbers up to 5,000 patients just waiting. These are approved patients. There are patients who have had uh, sort of the cream of the crop, if you will, of the dialysis patients. They're waiting for a transplant and then they die. And this is knowing that living kidney donation compared to the wait list is life-giving. So on the wait list of the mortality is about 52%. Living kidney donation, you can now increase that odds significantly. So why is it that this is happening? Is it because the public doesn't know about the living kidney donation? Well, let's think about it. Living donation actually is embraced by the public. In the Mayo Clinic study, 4 out of 5 patients would consider donating a kidney to a friend or a family member. But guess what? Half of them would consider donating a kidney to a stranger. There's an NKF survey that said 1 in 4 Americans would consider live donation if they knew someone who needed a kidney. Wow, if they knew someone who needed a kidney, 1 in 4 Americans would do this. That's 25% of Americans. That's about 50 million potential donors. Really? Well, if that's the case, why are only 6,000 live donor kidney transplants being performed every year when there are 100,000 patients waiting? Where are all the living donors? Perhaps they don't know that they are needed. Could that be the case? Let's sort of bring this to the community level. It's important to understand that if we have to increase organ donation in the United States, we have to change the conversation. We have to enhance community awareness. We have to make organ donation relatable. How do we go from a 1 in 3,000, this little green dot, 1 in 3,000 patients with kidney disease, to a sort of how do we go from that, in which we may not know anyone in our social network who's waiting for an organ, to a 1 in 8 scenario where we will definitely at some point in our life interact with that particular individual. That relationship, that ability to relate is what motivates people to want to make a difference. And as caregivers, if we put ourselves in the shoes of our patients, we need to encourage our patients to share their stories, not ask for a potential donor, just share their stories so that they're no longer a dot 1 in 3,000, but it becomes more relatable to people in their own social network. That brings us to the transplant candidate need. The transplant candidate need is engaging the potential donor. Is this the job of the patient? What do patients really feel? Most patients are completely reluctant to discuss their condition, let alone ask someone to donate a kidney to them. Half of them are absolutely embarrassed to ask. 80% say they don't know how to ask, and most everybody feels completely uncomfortable bringing up the topic. This is the hypothesis that is what led the John Hopkins Live Donor Champion Program, which is what the Big Ask Big Give is based on. Their hypothesis was if you separate the advocacy role from the patient, it will help them overcome these communication barriers. What does that mean? So we ask our recipients to identify either a friend, a family member, or a community member who's trained to advocate on behalf of the transplant candidate and spread awareness. And so this program ended up being where if a recipient identifies a champion for themselves, they go through a series of 5 meetings. At the start of the meeting, so at the first meeting, the comfort level is extremely low for everybody on a scale of 0 to 3. But as time went by, with every class, the comfort level increased. Well, what does that mean? Even if the comfort level for the advocate increased to be able to talk on behalf of the recipient, what did it translate into? It translated into the advocates and recipients randomized to the Champion program in Orange had a much higher first live donor referral to the transplant center compared to people who were standard of care who didn't enroll in that program. So clearly, this is sort of now a way to address a potential recipient need. Now, what are some of the potential donor needs? Have you actually thought about that? In looking at a typical living donor evaluation process, there is the donor inquiry. And most donors, when they call in to inquire and to ask for screening, they're already thinking about the approval and transplantation time. However, there's a series of things that happen. There's the pre-evaluation homework that they have to do. Some test centers require them to do blood pressure logs, 24-hour urines before they even make it. Then they get to the evaluation day and go through extensive testing and physician visits. After the evaluation day is done, they still require more testing before the actual approval. And then after the actual approval, there's still time to donation that needs to be fixed before that translates into a transplant. And so this is also completely peppered with multiple different phone calls, disappointments, back and forths before it actually materializes into something tangible from the donor's perspective. So Jessica, if we can launch the next poll at this point, please. And perhaps in the interest of time, we will use the chat function. Let me just go ahead and use the chat function instead. If you could all, in the chat box, think about this next question that I'm about to ask you. The poll question I have for you is, how many donor phone calls does it take to translate into one potential living donor transplant? All comers, if you're at a transplant center and you're getting donor phone calls, how many donor phone calls does it take to actually get one potential donor? Go ahead and put it in the chat function. "500" says Sandy Burton. Holly says 9. Annie says 10. Kiki says 1,000. Amy says 20 plus. Lata says 15. Joanne Porto says 10. Kevin Flu says 20. My gosh, I love some of these guesses. You know, it actually, for every 10 donor phone calls, it's about one approved donor. Now, I'm not saying that every recipient has to have 10 potential donors show up, but on the transplant center end, for every 10 donor phone calls, actually one materializes it. Now, it all completely depends. Some of you said 200 and 500, and those examples certainly exist when an individual donor goes and posts a recipient posts a billboard or a Facebook inquiry, and multiple phone calls come in, yes. But we're saying from the time that a phone call comes in for it to translate into a potential donor, 1 in 10. That's how hard this process is. And this process is hard not for just the transplant center. It's harder for the donors, the potential donor themselves. This is the idea of development of the Living Donor Navigator program at our institution, where part 1 is to train the potential recipient and the champion that they identified. We call it the advocacy training. But part 2 of this is actually, once a donor is identified, once the champion program works and the donor is identified, you then, that same navigator that helped the advocacy training for the recipient and their advocate, now will take over and help that donor navigate through this entire process from donor inquiry to living kidney donation. And there are multiple contact points. They are the ones that help keep track of exactly what's going on. And what we've found is, in not only with the champion part, a 9-fold increase in the likelihood of donor screening, but actually a 7-fold increase in likelihood of donor approval. And then if a donor is approved, then you're that much closer to transplantation. So with that, in the interest of time, and we have a lovely panel that I want all of us to interact with. I want to end there, but say our take-home points when we put ourselves in our recipient's shoes is to encourage our patients to share their story, make it a relatable event from 1 in 3,000 people with kidney disease to now 1 in 8. Advise them to find an advocate. It's hard for you to ask somebody to give you a kidney, but find somebody who will ask on your behalf. And then us as providers and caregivers identify and provide resources. be it NKF and Big Ass Best Give, which is what this whole day is about, which I love, it's fabulous, or other things. But this is what we are charged to do if we want to really increase organ donation in the United States. And with that, I say thank you to all of you, and I will open it up for questions, and then we will invite the panelists to join us. Pamela Singh says, awesome. Thank you, Pamela. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat function, and we will be looking at them and addressing them as we go. And Jessica told me if you answer the poll yourself, you'll see the results. So I guess I didn't answer that. Jessica, thank you for telling me about that. I can definitely do that and pull up the results. But looks like if I did that, who is in the audience? We have 35% nurses, 24% dietitians, 6% physicians, about 20% social workers, and 2% patients. So that's perfect. We directed this talk at, okay. And then why are you here? I love this. 21% are curious, 22% wanted to help potential recipients. Almost 30% here for the CME. Yes, the honest folks, and need to learn more about living donation, another third. So thank you, guys. With that, let us now open it up to our panel. And I invite, I'm going to stop my screen share, and I invite our wonderful panelists to join us. Let me check the chat function and see what questions could be there. Okay, so some of the questions are, what's the situation with opt-in, opt-out for deceased donor on the driving license? Absolutely important question, Dr. Wael Hussein. At the present time in the United States, we are a opt-in system. We have not gone to an opt-out system. There are pros and cons for it, and that's a discussion that we definitely should have, and if there's time, we can come back to it in the end. How does COVID impact the transplant? Ooh, Annie says, good question. And interestingly, transplant came to a screeching halt in March and April, and the numbers plummeted. After that, interestingly, the deceased donor numbers have taken off, and we have done more at least at our center, done more deceased donors this year than we have the previous year. And that seems to be the story around. Living donation has suffered because you have to see living donors in person before they're evaluated. So when evaluation came to a screeching halt, that sort of built up a huge backlog. It's slowly starting to catch up again, but COVID definitely has had an impact on transplantation. Is there a maximum age for a living donor? It's definitely a case by case. We do want them to be adults, so that's the minimum age. Have your state defines it's greater than 18 years in the state of Alabama, where I am. The maximum age is definitely a case by case. Up until age 60 to 65, most centers are okay. But hey, we've had a situation where it was a spouse-to-spouse donation, and about 70, the husband was 72, the wife was 70, and they donated to each other. Definitely a case by case, because there's mutual benefit for both of them. Loss of health on one is a shared experience in that couple, and gain of health is a gain of quality of life for both of them. Absolutely. All right. If Jessica and Patty, you could help me keep track of some of these other questions, we would now love to turn our attention to our fabulous panelists, and then we'll come back and answer the rest. So we have Miss Felicia Price. Hi, Felicia, if you could wave. Miss Price is one of our recipients, and she likes being called Fee. Hi, Fee. And then Fee's cousin and donor is Dean Price. Hi, Dean. Thank you both for being here. And then we have wonderful Mr. Jeffrey Dawson, who's a recipient. and he goes by Jeff. Hello, Jeff. And then we have lovely Miss Connie Kelly, who is his donor. Hi, Connie. And Fee has the energy of like 1,000-watt bulb. And so we are very, very excited to have everybody here. Thank you all. If I don't get a chance to say this before now, spending time with the four of you as you share your experience is a gift to all of us who are in this field, because we care about our patients and we want to learn how we can help them better and more. So with deep gratitude to all four of you. So let's get started. I'm going to direct the first question to you, Jeff. Jeff, tell us about your journey of kidney disease, your journey through dialysis. How did it make you feel when you found out? And share your high points and your low points. And Jeff, as you're talking, we're all going to mute ourselves so there's not an echo. So Connie, Fee, Dean, and
Okay. If you want me to start. Hello?
yes, Jeff. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, I wasn't sure if you could hear. I'm sorry. All right. Well, first, thank you so much for being having the opportunity to give my testimony this evening. I'm in Pittsburgh, and for 39 years, I worked as a trust fiduciary officer in local banks here. In 2018, I learned that my kidneys were functioning at 20% and declining. So the doctor suggested that I prepare myself for dialysis, as well as be tested and approved for the national transplant list. So I did go through that process, and in the summer of 2018, I first started at night, just so that I could continue to work my job during the day, and continue that process. In the meantime, I attended a Big Give seminar sponsored by the National Kidney Foundation and one of the health systems here in Pittsburgh. From there, I learned how to kind of formulate my personal story, and as well as learned about avenues for which to be able to tell that story. I was somewhat hesitant because I'm somewhat of an introvert. I don't belong to large social networks and things of that nature. And I'm not one to go to a sporting event and hold up a big sign that says I need a kidney, even though I applaud those who can do that, you know. So after starting dialysis through the process and doing it at night, my wife and I decided that it's probably best that I take early retirement, just so that I could start focusing on my health. Try to approach family members, but because of either age, health, or just overall fear, they weren't in a position to be able to assist me. So at that point, I realized that I was going to have to start going to or looking for a donor, whether it be a deceased donor or whether it be a living donor. Now, I became somewhat concerned, and you mentioned it earlier, when I learned that getting a deceased donor kidney could take as much as 5 to 7 years. So I was concerned as what would happen there. Got a little discouraged because I thought, again, I didn't have the proper tools in order to look for a living donor. So I kind of stopped in my tracks there. So that's kind of the ups and downs that were going on for me at that point in time.
Jeff, tell us what dialysis did to you.
Would you like me to go further?
Yeah, tell us what dialysis, how it made you feel.
Well, surely. Taking dialysis at night was It was a challenge in itself, first of all, because when I started dialysis, it was a hit or miss in getting me attached to the unit because the fistula hadn't matured to the process of, to where it functioned well. But, when we were successful, it was good. The thing, though, is switching from night to day was a big transition for me because at night, with a small group of people who were similar to me. They were still working full time during the day and going to dialysis at night. When I switched to mornings, going first thing in the morning, I was surprised by the fact that there were, probably twice as many people, more elderly than what I was accustomed to at night. No chance of even having a transplant because of their age or other health. Some had mental health issues that kind of caused a little bit of an interest or a concern. So it became a little bit depressing there, even, after leaving, stopped going at night and thinking that I could be a little better during the day. The process, procedure, or the audience changed on me a little bit.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing your story. You talked about having a vibrant career. We lost you there for a moment, Jeff. I think we got most of it. You talked about having a vibrant career and then having kidney disease that halted you in your tracks. And then from there on, dialysis and life on dialysis. And you knew you needed to find a living donor because you couldn't continue that. But you were too shy. You were not somebody who naturally was inclined to share your story. So thank you for sharing that perspective. And we'll come back to you in a bit, Jeff. Fee, same question to you, Fee. Tell us about your journey, Fee, of kidney disease, of dialysis, of what it meant to you, and share some of your high points and your low points, Fee.
Yes, and also thank you for asking me, for Patty, for contacting me. Vineeta, I've enjoyed every conversation we've had, so thank you. As far as ups and downs for dialysis for me, I was doing dialysis at home with a machine that I named Lola. From that song, Whatever Lola Wants, Lola Gets, because I could not live my life without Lola. So I had Lola, we took a couple of trips together, and it was a way for me to feel a bit normal because I still had the daytime to hang out with my friends and go to work and do all of those things. But one day at work, I just wasn't feeling well, went home, fell asleep, thought maybe I had a cold or something, and then couldn't breathe. In the middle of the night, went to the hospital, and long story short, the fluid that I was putting in my abdomen, I had like a little bit of a leak, so it was getting into my lungs. So I couldn't breathe because fluid had settled in my lungs and I had pneumonia. So that was very much a downside for me because then now I have to go to a clinic, and unlike Jeff, I don't think we had nighttime as an option. So I had no choice but to go during the day. I went 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And it was, for me, very, very depressing. It seemed like the people at my facility weren't necessarily elderly or older or didn't seem to have a lot of extenuating health problems. It more or less just seemed that they had just given up. That they had just kind of rested in that this is my life. I mean, for some dialysis patients, that time in dialysis is like their social time. You know, they get to know these people. Those are their friends. And I just had a very different idea of what I wanted to be doing 4 hours, 3 days a week. So that was a bit depressing. I will say the good news, without skipping ahead, is I was in the hospital when I got the news that Dean was a match for me. So I at least went into dialysis knowing that it wouldn't be permanent.
before I even reflect on what you said for a moment, Phoebe, have to draw attention to the chat where Dr. Zhang says, that's a great idea. We should give our patients dialysis machine a name. And then Sarah says, I love it, Lola. And I wanted to sing the song, Lola, right? And then Bridget says, humanizing dialysis. The dialysis equipment has a name, fabulous. And Bernadette Vincent says, both for you, Jeff and Fee, incredible. I'm so in awe. And so Dr. Zhang says, let's do that. Encourage our patients to name their machine. So here you go, just with the two of you talking, the audience is already starting to realize, putting themselves in your shoes and say, what about your experience? Can they take from here and help their own patients? Absolutely lovely. Thank you, Jeff and Fee. And you both commented on the fact that while you're grateful for dialysis, that's not what you wanted to do for 4 hours, 3 times a day. And the people that you were surrounded with, Jeff, sort of, and the things that were happening to them were something that were weighing heavy on your heart. And Fee, you had a life to live, and the time you spent with Lola, as precious as it was time you would have gifted somewhere else. So that's wonderful. So let's talk about the next question then we have for both of you. And again, Jeff, we'll go to you first. You mentioned, Jeff, that you're not somebody who's going to go to a stadium and hold up a sign saying, hey, give me a kidney. And you actually even went a step further and said you really appreciate and applaud people who would do it. But that wasn't you. So, Jeff, how did you end up sharing your story and find a donor? Tell us about that.
Interesting. It was by, let's say it's by accident. Hello?
You're back now. Try again.
Okay, I was saying it was by accident. One evening, okay. I attend a small church here in Pittsburgh, and one evening me and my wife were having dinner with my pastor and his wife, and he shared with me that we go to a church that's more like family as opposed to a congregation. And he shared with me the fact that some people had approached him about me. They were concerned about my health. They noticed, it seems like I was losing weight. I seemed to be a little restless or listless a bit. Seemed to be always having chills, or just the body just wasn't the same. So, and their concern is that maybe I had cancer. My pastor is one who is not, he didn't want us on my behalf. So what he suggested to me and my wife is that one Sunday before service began, that I make a public announcement and just let everybody know what my condition was. So I did that, and thinking of soliciting for a kidney, but in my approach, I happened to family there that by chance had another kidney that they wanted to give away, a willing recipient. So after service, a couple people approached me, asked me, what's the process? What do you do? Things of that nature. But I think it was more than they were thinking about actually being a donor. Connie, however, approached my wife and said this was something that had been on her mind and it had been on her heart for some time, and she wanted to pursue it further. And so they came over to me and they asked me about it, and through the big give, I was presented with these information cards. He was interested, and I keep, so I gave that to Connie for her, and not thinking much of it, but know she had an interest in it. And kind of forgot about it until maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, she came past and she said, hey, guess what? I've got an interview coming up in the next couple of weeks or so to be tested. And, so I was really surprised by it. And, it was probably a few weeks later, my wife calls me from work and says, hey, did you hear from Connie? I said, I have no, haven't heard from her at all. And she said, well, she just, I don't know if she texted her or called, but she said she just found out that she's a match and we're scheduled for a transplant. And I remember to this day of really just kind of falling to my knees because it's something that I thought would never happen. It actually did happen. So really heartwarming.
Wow, Jeff, we can tell even now talking about that makes you emotional. It is an emotional moment to hear that you are in receipt of a gift that you didn't even expect was going to come your way. And for those of you who couldn't hear Jeff as well, we had met as a panel before and I'd heard
Exactly.
Jeff's story. And what Jeff specifically had said was that when he got up to speak to the congregation, he was actually skeptical. He wasn't going up there to ask people for a living donor. He was just going there to share his stories. Pastor told him, you have to talk about your story. You have to let people know what's going on. And that sharing of the story for Jeff translated into that gift that is in the form of Connie Kelly today. And Connie, gosh, Fee's told us that she'll cry at a drop of a hat. Fee, we're coming to you in just a bit. But Connie, there's a message here for you from multiple people. It says, wow, Connie, you're a hero. What a wonderful gift. Annie Pugh says, thank you at Connie Kelly. Bernadette says, what a blessing. I'm so thankful for your gift of sharing so eloquently how your journey led you where you are. That was for you, Jeff. There's Bernadette saying, now that you come back, what a blessing. I'm so thankful for your gift of sharing so eloquently how your journey led you where you are. And then Cheryl says, thank you for sharing your stories. Very special. Shaya Patel says, that's life-giving. Absolutely. Beautiful comments. Thank you, audience, for supporting our wonderful panelists here. Fee, my love, ready?
Sure.
How did you end up, you went through a similar similar sort of journey where you're not one to talk about your health. How did you tell us a little bit more about that and how you went from that to Dean becoming your donor?
Yes, I didn't want to talk about my health primarily because I didn't want anyone to have pity on me or treat me differently or any of that. Which is strange because, as everyone on this panel knows, I can talk and will talk to anyone for however long. But with this situation, it just wasn't something I wanted to share. So I didn't for 5 years. I told my parents. About 6 months after that, I was with a really close group of friends, my sorority sisters. It was our 10-year anniversary. And even though this isn't necessarily happy news, I just wasn't sure when we would be together again. So I shared it there and they got so emotional that I got emotional that I said, okay, I can't keep telling people. I can't keep doing this if every time I'm going to be this river of tears, especially once I had already accepted this is what my diagnosis is. My doctor and I have a plan. So it's almost like every time I shared it and someone's face looked crestfallen, I had to accept it again. And that was just very taxing on me mentally and emotionally. So the good thing is I have a really good doctor who made sure I got on the transplant list early to accrue time, just in case. And then another cousin, me and Dean's, our second cousin, actually, she's like my little sister. And, one day she said, people just post the craziest things on social media. I think you need to share your story. And this was February of 2015. And I happened to look up that March is National Kidney Month. So I said, okay, I'll post something on March 1st. I'm very thematic in that way. So I said, I'll post it on March 1st. It's National Kidney Month. We'll see what happens. And it really is something to be said about just sharing your story. I just decided the moment I pressed, post or whatever, I said, people are going to support me in the way that is best for them. If that means prayer, if that means calling, if that means going to the local hospital and finding out if they are good to be a living donor, I just accepted that people are going to support me in the way that's most comfortable for them. And, you know, same as Jeff, I had so many friends and family that wanted to be living donors, but hypertension, diabetes, lupus in their family, so many things prevented them from being able to. So luckily, my rock star cousin, who is in perfect health, you know, when he came, you know, it was pretty much like, oh, check. He's got everything. So, but before him, you know, there were other people. He wasn't my that wasn't my first time around the rodeo. So just like with deceased donation, you know, you can get the call several times before it becomes real for you. It can be the same thing with a living donor. So sometimes there's more than one person. There's so many levels to it that they could get all the way to the very end, and the doctors could say, "Oh, we saw this. You're not a good match," you know. So it's just it was like I said, I was in the hospital when I found out, and it couldn't have come at a better time.
Wow, Fee, thank you. I have to share something funny in the chat box. As you talked about your sorority, Bernadette asked which sorority.
Delta Sigma Theta, Bernadette. Are you familiar? Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
You shared a beautiful perspective. You said that part of the reason why you weren't willing to share your story is when you did end up sharing it, the crestfallen, sad, emotional person in front of you was you reliving that entire story all over again. Mm-hmm. And the caregiver you are for everybody around you, you felt like you needed to take care of them.
Yeah.
You were taking care of your own self. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that perspective with us and then the rest of your journey. But share your stories, what you both have shown us. So Connie, let's go to you now. As our now donor, back then a potential donor, you heard Jeff get up in the congregation and speak. What went through your mind when you heard Jeff and was in need of a kidney? And what was your journey like? What were your high points and low points?
So to hear someone that you do life with, you know, share something like that. And Jeff and his beautiful wife, Kim, are, you know, pillars in our church, and Jeff's an elder and Kim's a trustee, and we do discipleship together. And it was emotionally upsetting, you know, and I thought, wow, I just had no idea. And so I do remember a few of us went over to Jeff and we were talking to him after the service, and, you know, I just felt this stirring in my spirit, maybe like a Holy Spirit whisper, prompting me to ask. And so he gave me his card, you know, his donor card, and I saw that, I saw his blood type on there. And it had been quite a while since I had donated blood. I had no idea what my blood type even was. And so I went home, and I remember mentioning it to my husband, who was a critical care nurse. So he, in the long run, ended up being the hard sell in this situation, because he works with, you know, worst case scenarios. So I just said, you know, I'm just going to see. I think I'm just going to go up to the blood bank and see if they can pull my records and just see what my blood type is. And here I'm A negative. And so, you know, throughout the process, I just kept praying, God, if this is not for me, just stop it. You know, like let some test come back that I'm not the donor for him. And Jeff, the way you tell it, it seems like a really short period of time, but it was actually, you know, quite some months. Like I felt like I played phone tag with the nurse coordinators at the Starsville Clinic, to no one's fault, but, you know, the holidays came in there. And so it was actually that following spring that I actually set some appointments. And I knew that through talking to the people at the clinic that we were kind of on my timeline, and I'm a teacher. And I said, you know, if we could, can we hold off till the summer? Can we do this in the summer? And they said, absolutely. You know, we can do this when you need to do it. And so I went in May for the 2 days of testing, and when they said I was a match, when they, when they brought us up to the panel and said, and called and said you're a match, I was ecstatic, and once I was on the journey, I couldn't not do it. If there was something I could do to help my dear friend and brother in Christ, I had to do it. I had to step forward and to keep going. So July 23rd of last year, we met at 5:30 in the morning, and here we are. And I think the high points, there were so many sweet spots in our story, but the day that was a Tuesday morning, and Thursday afternoon, I was released to go home, and one of the doctors came in and she said, it makes me very emotional. She said, because of you, everyone got to move up. And that just really touched my heart because, it just speaks to what donation can do for everyone in the chain. So.
Well, Connie, that was an emotional statement there and such a beautiful perspective. Because of you, everyone got to move up a spot. Wow. Let's sit with that for just a moment and express our gratefulness for this beautiful people who are our living donors. Yes, Dr. Zhang, we can learn so much from our patients. Very moving. Love it. Uplifting. Dean, Connie, thank you. Dean, what went through your mind when you considered Fee having kidney disease and you being her cousin wanting to consider doing this? What was your journey like from that point on?
Well, my journey was probably not very much like Shay's, because Fee, I'm sorry, we call her Shay in the family and Fee outside the world. But because as you can tell, Fee is more the emotional, extrovert, outgoing one. I'm much more of an introvert, prefer to stay at home for 2-3 months at a time. So, but I remember seeing the Instagram post and messaging her, and I was just thinking, like, is this something I could do? And weirdly enough, on TV that night, there was this TV show. It was named Nashville, and they were talking about a transplant. And I went, I could do this, because it crossed my mind like this would not be the hardest thing I've done. Because before this, I was in the Marine Corps and I deployed to Iraq twice. I said, that's hard. This is me. They're just going to knock me out. I'm going to wake up and it's going to be over. So that just sounds so much simpler. So I went, yeah, I could do this. And that's when I started the process.
Wow, Dean, you make it sound so simple. You said, I thought about it when I thought about Fee. Could I do it? And then it was a TV show. And compared to the near-death experiences, probably the war might have made you come face to face with, you said, gosh, this is easy breezy. I don't know how many people would think that. That is incredible that your approach to this was as simple as I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up with one kidney. It's something so many of our donors have said, like, I have 2 good kidneys. I'll just drive by, drop one off, and I'll go on to live the life I'm going to live. And just special, special people that you are, that you can process and think that way. So here are some comments for both of you. First of all, so many, I think I've lost, but Jacqueline says it brought tears to her eyes when she heard you, Connie. It says, Connie, you're amazing. What a great heart you have. God bless your stories. Bernadette says, thank you for your service, Dean. What a hero. Patty says, wonderful, amazing people. Caroline Perez says, Lord bless you, Dean and Connie. Mary says, Dean, thank you for your service, true American hero. Bridget says, thank you for lifting us all. A most profound and beautiful moment on Friday the 13th. Thank you all. And then Shaya says, you're all special people. Alexandra says, very inspiring panel. I'm in tears listening to your stories. And Emily says, it's just amazing to hear of your story and to also hear that you have given your life to be in the service. Amazing human. Thank you. So we have a few more minutes left before we end. Guys, we've been together for an hour. Our panel, our audience, our talk, and look how quickly time passes when the people we are here to serve, you, our recipients and donors, teach us how we can be of use or help to you. So again, thank you so much for being here. And before we end, I'm going to go around all four of you and ask you, as we conclude this time together, what is your word? What is going through your mind right now? Today, Connie and Fee, as having been living donors, Connie and Dean, and Fee and Jeff have been recipients and re-entering life in a different way. Where are you today? What is the word for you for today? Let's start with you, Fee. Oh, you didn't want to go first this time. Okay, we'll give you a moment. Who wants to go first? How about that?
No, only because, Vineeta, I'm sorry, you went out for a second, so I just didn't catch everything. So I was hoping someone else would answer so I could get some context clues.
All right. So, word of the day for you, and today as the recipient on the other side, or as the donor on the other side, what is going through your mind?
Okay, I'll do the word last, but what's going through my mind as a recipient is just primarily that I'm going to continue doing this work. Luckily for me, I got with the National Kidney Foundation before I was even on dialysis. I already knew I wanted to be connected to these people. I believed that a transplant was going to happen for me. And I knew after the fact, I wanted to advocate for other people to seek living donation. So I would say that my word, I would just say gratitude. I don't know anything else to say. I literally posted on my Instagram this morning that I was just lying in bed and my finger was just tracing my transplant scar and how I will never not be amazed. I will never not be amazed at the fact that because of my cousin, because of another person's selflessness, that I can get up every morning and do what I love. Sometimes I'll look at the clock and I'll say, if this was 4 years ago, I would be in dialysis right now, not on my yoga mat in my backyard. So I have no choice but for gratitude to be my word forever.
Tracing the scar and expressing gratitude. Thank you, Fee. Jeff, what your word for the day?
My word for the day. Well, as you saw from my story as well as Connie's story, we're people of faith. This situation that we went through was further testimony to the way our life is and how we are provided for. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. It just helps me tell my story, my bigger story, even better. The second thing is I think all who are on the line at this point are really kind of the professionals and not those seeking a kidney or seeking a donor. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But what I would say to them is I found out it's, don't be hesitant. Don't be afraid to tell your story, because after all, it's your story and it's only you know the contents of that story. You know the contents of that story better than anyone else. So don't be afraid of it. Don't be hesitant about it. Just tell your story.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jeff. Tell your story. Wonderful. Connie, your word?
To kind of piggyback off of Jeff, a thought came to me as we were talking about people who are seeking a donor. And I just kept thinking of the phrase, the answer will always be no if you don't ask the question, so step out and ask that question. But I just continue to be inspired by our medical community. You guys who are involved in donation have such a passion for what you do. And that was very apparent to me throughout this journey, and the people that I spoke to, and your dedication to us as patients while we were in the hospital is just very awe-inspiring. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Connie. Share your story, you say, and you reflect back a gift to us in your words when you say we are awe-inspiring. Nothing is more awe-inspiring than the four of you. Dean, man of few words, we'll conclude with yours.
I actually have two words.
Yes, please.
The first word is success, because when I see, like, for me, the bigger the problem, the less I kind of cut the emotion out and just look at the task and accomplish it. And This is success. We have the kidney, yay. And Fee knows I'm just like my dad and her dad. That's the way we work. We push the emotion aside, the bigger the problem. Small problems get a lot of emotion. Big problems, no emotion. And the second word is Sydney, because that's what we name our kidney.
Lola the machine and Sydney the kidney. There are some absolutely fabulous comments that are coming through here. I encourage the audience and also our panelists to look at what's being said. But we are a few minutes over our time, so we will end. I will end by putting my hand on my heart. That sign to me means I will carry all of you in my heart forward. Thank you for the gift you have given us today of sharing your stories. I know I can speak for the audience as well as myself that we could keep talking to you for another hour. But thank you again, all four of you. Appreciate you. Bye.